She believed loyalty was built quietly, through years of consistency, sacrifice, and emotional labor. While he chased ambition, she stabilized routines, protected appearances, and absorbed stress without complaint. Friends praised his growth, rarely noticing the invisible structure she maintained behind everything. Every promotion carried her fingerprints, though her name never appeared in congratulations or speeches. She learned to celebrate him softly, reducing herself so his confidence could expand comfortably. Love, for her, meant becoming background noise so his voice sounded stronger publicly. She ignored early discomfort, convincing herself discomfort was normal when supporting someone driven. Small dismissals accumulated, disguised as jokes, impatience, or moments he promised to revisit later. She trusted time would reward loyalty, believing shared history created permanent emotional credit. That belief anchored her firmly, even as the ground beneath their relationship quietly shifted. The new woman appeared gradually, first as a harmless name mentioned casually over dinner. He described her as refreshing, ambitious, uncomplicated, everything relationships eventually required, supposedly. At first, there was reassurance, delivered with practiced calm and carefully chosen dismissive smiles. Soon, reassurance transformed into comparison, framed as honesty rather than cruelty or disrespect. He praised the new woman's confidence, her appearance, her energy, all within her hearing range. Social gatherings became stages where subtle humiliations were delivered beneath polite conversation tones. The new woman never looked away, holding eye contact with a victorious, deliberate smile. Laughter followed remarks that reduced shared memories into inconveniences he had apparently outgrown. She felt herself shrinking publicly, unsure whether reacting would confirm his narrative about her. Silence became her shield, even as it deepened the humiliation she was expected to endure. The breaking point was not betrayal itself, but the way it was presented without shame. He invited her to dinner, calling it closure, growth, maturity, words stripped of meaning. The new woman sat beside him, confident, relaxed, already occupying a space once hers. He spoke openly about future plans, carefully excluding her from every sentence that followed. Her contributions were reframed as limitations, obstacles he claimed to have finally escaped. No one defended her, because no one understood what had quietly been taken from her. She realized the room had decided her role before she even arrived that evening. Humiliation settled slowly, heavier than anger, heavier than grief, heavier than disbelief combined. She understood then that love had been rewritten as dependency in his convenient version. Remaining seated would mean accepting the identity they had just assigned her permanently. She stood calmly, thanked them both, and left without demanding explanations or apologies. The absence of drama confused them more than any confrontation could have achieved. Outside, she inhaled deeply, realizing her life had just collapsed without witnesses. There was no plan yet, only the certainty that nothing familiar remained intact. She walked away carrying shame she did not deserve, but still fully felt. Behind closed doors, she would cry, question herself, and replay every warning ignored. For now, she allowed them the illusion of victory, believing it would protect them. What neither understood was that humiliation does not always destroy, sometimes it recalibrates focus. This moment did not end her story, though it felt like erasure at the time. It marked the precise point where endurance quietly transformed into something far more dangerous. She returned to an apartment that suddenly felt borrowed rather than lived in. Every object reminded her of compromises disguised as partnership and shared sacrifice. The silence inside those walls was louder than any argument they never resolved. She replayed moments where her intuition whispered warnings she actively chose to silence. Late nights, unpaid efforts, emotional mediation, all reframed now as invisible labor. She realized how easily support becomes expectation when gratitude quietly disappears. There was no dramatic collapse, only the slow understanding of being strategically undervalued. He had not stolen her time accidentally. He had budgeted it efficiently. That realization hurt deeper than betrayal because it reframed years as transaction. Pain arrived not as shock, but as clarity arriving far too late. Outside, the world moved forward, indifferent to her private unraveling. Friends adjusted loyalties subtly, choosing convenience over uncomfortable moral alignment. Invitations stopped arriving, conversations shortened, curiosity replaced concern effortlessly. His version traveled faster, smoother, easier to digest than hers ever could. In his narrative, she was supportive, yet limiting, loyal, yet uninspiring. People accepted that explanation because it protected their belief in upward mobility. Questioning him would mean questioning the systems they also depended upon. She learned how quickly empathy disappears when status offers safer shelter. Loneliness expanded not from isolation, but from witnessing selective understanding in real time. Pain sharpened as social silence validated the humiliation she never consented to. Financial reality followed emotional collapse with brutal precision and indifference. Accounts previously shared became inaccessible, justified through technical language and delays. Agreements once verbal were suddenly remembered differently, favoring his convenience entirely. She searched documents, emails, contracts, discovering how trust creates dangerous gaps. Every overlooked detail now felt like negligence, though it was once love. He had prepared exits while she prepared futures, never suspecting divergence. Resources vanished quietly, leaving her responsible for consequences she never authored. Security dissolved faster than emotion because numbers do not pause for grief. Each calculation reinforced how dependency had been engineered, not accidentally formed. This loss was measurable, undeniable, and far less forgiving than heartbreak. At her lowest point, humiliation shifted from external to deeply internalized. She questioned her intelligence, judgment, and worth beyond usefulness to others. Self-blame crept in, disguised as accountability, eroding confidence with familiar language. She wondered how strength could coexist with such strategic blindness for so long. Sleep became inconsistent, haunted by imagined conversations and delayed realizations. Still, beneath exhaustion, something refused complete surrender or disappearance. Pain began reorganizing her priorities rather than merely overwhelming her senses. She stopped seeking validation, conserving energy once wasted on explanation. Survival instincts activated quietly, uninterested in fairness or emotional resolution. What remained was raw endurance, waiting for direction rather than consolation. Reality accelerated once emotional shock faded and practical consequences demanded attention. Bills arrived without sentiment. Deadlines ignored her exhaustion. Obligations showed no mercy. She accepted temporary work far below her previous capacity, swallowing pride for stability. Every position reminded her how quickly relevance disappears when networks dissolve. Colleagues saw only a capable woman starting over, never questioning why. She learned that failure often looks identical to humility from the outside. Days blurred together, marked by routine labor and unspoken self-reproach. There was no audience for resilience, only quiet repetition and necessary endurance. Ambition shrank temporarily, replaced by immediate survival calculations and caution. This was not rebuilding yet, only preventing further collapse from accelerating. Meanwhile, his ascent became louder, curated carefully across professional circles. He appeared confident, decisive, publicly supported by the new woman constantly. Photos surfaced from events she once helped organize without recognition. Interviews framed his success as self-made, uninterrupted, earned through bold decisions. Her absence was explained casually as a chapter outgrown rather than erased. People nodded, accepting simplified narratives that preserved admiration comfortably. The new woman smiled beside him, absorbing borrowed authority effortlessly. They celebrated momentum, unaware of how fragile expansion becomes without foundation. Success protected him temporarily, disguising structural weaknesses beneath performance. He mistook visibility for permanence, confusing applause with stability. She attempted to re-enter familiar industries, only to encounter closed doors politely. Recommendations hesitated, conversations stalled, opportunities redirected without explanation. Her association with him now worked against her rather than opening paths. Distance from power revealed how access often masquerades as competence unfairly. She understood then how proximity had inflated perceptions about both of them. Separated, she was invisible, while he remained amplified by lingering momentum. That imbalance forced reflection sharper than resentment ever could. She stopped blaming individuals and began analyzing systems methodically. Failure turned into data, disappointment into information worth studying carefully. This shift marked the quiet end of emotional thinking. The lowest moment arrived without ceremony or witnesses late one evening. She calculated expenses, income, and time remaining with ruthless honesty. There was no safety net left, only probability and personal limits. Fear surfaced briefly, then settled into cold acceptance of circumstance. She acknowledged that survival required abandoning comfort, not chasing dignity. This acceptance stripped illusion away, leaving only clear, uncomfortable truth. She had fallen far enough to see reality without distortion. From that depth, comparison lost relevance and ego lost authority. Nothing remained to protect except future agency she had not built yet. This was the bottom, and it demanded transformation or permanent erasure. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story. She did not wake up inspired or motivated, only decisively uninterested in repeating patterns. Emotional processing stopped being priority, replaced by observation and controlled distance. She began reviewing past decisions not with guilt, but with analytical detachment. Every mistake became a data point rather than a personal failure to mourn. She stopped asking why things happened and started asking how systems allowed them. That shift alone restored a sense of control she had not felt in years. Instead of rehearsing conversations, she studied contracts, structures, and incentives. Pain remained present, but no longer dictated where her attention was directed. Clarity emerged not as comfort, but as functional understanding of leverage. This was not healing yet, but strategic reorientation driven by necessity. She accepted work others avoided, positions offering exposure rather than prestige. Quiet roles placed her near operations, finances, and decision-making backbones. She listened more than she spoke, earning trust through reliability and restraint. Patterns revealed themselves quickly when ego stopped interrupting observation. She noticed how authority flowed, who benefited, and who remained invisible. Every organization echoed familiar dynamics she once ignored within her relationship. People who did real work rarely received credit, yet carried disproportionate risk. She recognized herself in them immediately, not emotionally, but structurally. Learning accelerated because survival sharpened focus without mercy. Knowledge accumulated quietly, compounding faster than confidence ever had. Money became a subject, not a taboo or emotional symbol anymore. She learned how capital moved, stalled, multiplied, or disappeared silently. Budgets replaced hope, forecasts replaced reassurance, margins replaced promises. She tracked her progress obsessively, not to celebrate, but to correct deviations. Small wins mattered because they confirmed competence independent of validation. For the first time, stability felt self-generated rather than granted externally. She reduced consumption, redirected energy, and eliminated unnecessary dependencies. Freedom began looking less romantic and more procedural by the day. Control returned incrementally through discipline, rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Each choice reinforced separation from the person she used to be. Occasionally, news of him surfaced, though it no longer carried emotional charge. His success continued, but details now registered as operational rather than personal. She noticed expansion without consolidation, speed without reinforcement. Decisions appeared reactive, driven by image maintenance rather than resilience. The new woman remained visible, but her role stayed decorative, not structural. She understood then that appearances often mask instability approaching quietly. Timing mattered more than confrontation, and patience became her sharpest asset. She stopped measuring distance between them and focused on trajectory instead. From this vantage point, the future finally appeared negotiable again. Transformation had begun, unnoticed by anyone who once underestimated her. She moved from observation to participation, choosing moments carefully rather than impulsively. Opportunities appeared once she positioned herself near unresolved problems others avoided. She offered solutions without demanding recognition, letting outcomes speak quietly instead. Trust formed around consistency, not charisma, which suited her deliberate pace perfectly. Decision-makers noticed results before noticing her, an advantage she exploited intentionally. She learned how influence often arrives disguised as responsibility no one wants initially. Each solved issue expanded her access to information previously kept guarded. Control grew indirectly through reliability, not confrontation or visible ambition. Power accumulated in fragments, unnoticed by those distracted by titles and appearances. This phase required patience because premature visibility would invite unnecessary resistance. She formalized knowledge into structure, documenting processes others treated casually. Contracts became familiar terrain, no longer intimidating or emotionally charged. She identified weak clauses, misaligned incentives, and dependencies hiding in plain sight. What once felt overwhelming now appeared predictable under systematic analysis. She began advising quietly, steering decisions without attaching her name publicly. Leaders appreciated outcomes without questioning origin, preserving her anonymity strategically. Every success reinforced her preference for leverage over applause. She declined opportunities promising exposure, but lacking long-term positioning. Control mattered more than credit, especially when timing remained critical. Momentum built silently, protected by deliberate understatement and restraint. Money followed structure naturally, responding to discipline rather than optimism. She reinvested earnings into learning, access, and relationships with asymmetrical value. Short-term comfort was postponed, replaced by long-term optionality and resilience. She diversified income carefully, avoiding reliance on any single gatekeeper again. For the first time, she experienced financial agency without emotional attachment. Numbers stopped triggering fear, instead offering feedback she could adjust rationally. Progress accelerated because decisions were now insulated from ego interference. She tracked growth meticulously, anticipating pressure points before they emerged. Stability evolved into flexibility, flexibility into strategic confidence. Wealth, in her hands, became a tool rather than a symbol. Unbeknownst to him, their professional paths began converging quietly. She entered circles adjacent to his, never crossing visibility lines prematurely. Information traveled faster than reputation in these environments, favoring prepared minds. She learned which partners questioned his leadership privately, but complied publicly. Weak loyalty revealed itself through hesitation, delays, and unspoken frustrations. She cataloged these signals patiently. Understanding timing was everything. The new woman remained peripheral, visible yet excluded from substantive decisions. That detail confirmed her analysis rather than provoking satisfaction or emotion. The board was assembling itself without announcement or confrontation. What remained was execution, requiring precision rather than emotion. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story. She waited until alignment replaced urgency, refusing to rush what precision demanded. When she moved, it was through documents, not declarations or personal confrontations. Partnerships shifted quietly as contracts reached review points few remembered existed. Investors reassessed risk, once provided information previously withheld or minimized. Clauses activated exactly as written, indifferent to reputation or past performance. What appeared sudden externally was years overdue internally within the structure. Cash flow tightened first, subtle enough to dismiss, serious enough to destabilize confidence. Operational stress exposed decisions once hidden by momentum and favorable optics. Meetings multiplied without resolution, revealing leadership gaps long ignored. Control began transferring without announcement, guided by legality rather than emotion. He sensed resistance but misdiagnosed its source, attributing tension to market conditions. Confidence turned defensive as explanations replaced clarity during closed-door discussions. The new woman remained present publicly, offering reassurance she could not substantiate privately. Her presence amplified perception issues rather than stabilizing operational realities. Executives requested documentation he could not immediately produce convincingly. Trust eroded not through scandal, but through procedural friction and unanswered questions. He attempted authority displays, which accelerated skepticism rather than restoring control. Every corrective action arrived late, addressing symptoms rather than underlying weaknesses. Momentum reversed quietly, transforming admiration into cautious distance almost overnight. By the time he noticed isolation, options had already narrowed significantly. She stepped forward only when invited, positioning herself as solution, not threat. Her proposals emphasized continuity, risk reduction, and long-term preservation of value. Boards prefer calm competence during instability, a preference she understood intimately. Authority shifted incrementally through votes, delegations, and reassignments framed as temporary. He retained title briefly, stripped of influence gradually through compliance mechanisms. Resistance became futile because every step followed established governance frameworks. She avoided personal interaction, letting process deliver consequences impersonally. The new woman faded as relevance required substance she never possessed. What remained was operational reality correcting years of ego-driven expansion. Justice advanced not loudly, but conclusively through institutional design. The final transition occurred during a routine review lacking drama or spectacle. Assets transferred, responsibilities reassigned, access limited according to policy. He signed documents understanding too late what cooperation had cost him. There were no accusations, only acknowledgments of strategic necessity. His exit was framed as amicable, protecting the organization rather than his pride. She assumed control officially, her name appearing where his once dominated materials. Applause was restrained, respect evident, decisions immediately reflecting new leadership. She did not look for him. Knowing outcomes spoke more effectively than words. What had been taken from her years earlier now returned multiplied and secured. Justice, at this stage, required no witnesses, only permanence. He left the building carrying a box that held symbols of authority, now functionless. Access cards were deactivated politely, passwords reassigned, conversations abruptly concluded. Former colleagues avoided eye contact, unsure how familiarity should behave after collapse. His name stopped opening doors once influence no longer followed it. Phone calls went unanswered, then unreturned, then entirely unnecessary. Reputation evaporated faster than assets because credibility depends on continuity. The city felt unfamiliar without status, cushioning every interaction automatically. For the first time, anonymity arrived not as freedom, but as punishment. He discovered how quickly respect disappears when utility is removed. There was no villain left to blame, only consequences operating efficiently. The new woman vanished before the final paperwork even settled completely. Without visibility, leverage, or future benefit, loyalty lost its incentive. Her departure lacked confrontation, mirroring how she had entered his life. What once felt like partnership revealed itself as consumption under better lighting. He did not chase explanations, already understanding the transaction had ended. Silence replaced performance, exposing the absence beneath years of display. Savings dwindled, while obligations remained unimpressed by past achievements. Opportunities he once dismissed now rejected him without recognition. Reinvention sounded motivational until survival stripped it of glamour entirely. Necessity narrowed options brutally, leaving dignity negotiable for income. The job offer arrived through an agency that never asked about his history. Retail required no narrative, no vision, only availability and compliance. He accepted without negotiation, grateful simply to be considered useful again. The uniform erased individuality, replacing ambition with scripted politeness. Days became measured in hours standing, smiling, repeating practiced phrases. Customers did not see downfall, only another employee trained to assist. Each sale reminded him how far perception had fallen from authority. Former skills provided no advantage within fluorescent lighting and rigid schedules. Work reduced him to presence, not potential, execution without influence. Humiliation settled slowly, reinforced daily by routine and recognition absence. One afternoon, she entered the store without announcing herself. Her appearance drew attention effortlessly, composed, confident, unmistakably in control. She examined shoes calmly, asking questions he answered automatically. He recognized her immediately, posture tightening despite professional obligation. She did not acknowledge recognition, treating him as any other employee. The transaction proceeded efficiently, payment approved without hesitation. She thanked him politely, tone neutral, eyes forward, memory unshared. As she left, realization struck with delayed precision and irreversible clarity. She had taken everything, including the version of himself he believed permanent. Justice concluded not with words, but with quiet, undeniable reality.